So let's talk about a midpoint. Well, first off, the word should look pretty familiar to you, even if you haven't seen it in math. Mid stands for the middle. So really, it's the middle point. Okay, so if we have this segment AB here, there's our notation for segment. Let's go ahead and give it or mark the midpoint C. Well, if C is the midpoint of AB, well, the only way that that could be true, if we think about this kind of intuitively, is if segment AC is congruent to segment CB. And so we can write that here, that if this is true, then we know that segment AC must be congruent to segment CB. So if that's the case, we know that their lengths must also be the same. So AC must be equal to CB. Again, if they're the same thing, again, that's what congruent means. Congruent means that they're the exact same type of piece, size, everything. Then their lengths must be equal to each other. Well, let's go ahead and add in some algebra here. So if we know that segment AC is equal to 2x minus 5, and we know that segment CB is equal to 3x minus 8, well, then we already determined that we know those two lengths must be the same. And from there, we can use some simple algebraic techniques and find the value of x that makes these segments congruent. And so what we found here is that if x is equal to 3, then these two segments here should be equal to each other, making C the midpoint. So let's go ahead and verify that by plugging in 3 for x and making sure that it makes these two segments the same length. Perfect. So now that we know that these have the same length and they're both segments, so they're also the same shape, we know they must be congruent. Again, just as a reminder, congruent means that they're both the same size. In this case, size would be length. And they're the same shape. In this case, they're both segments. So that's a brief introduction on midpoint. Key takeaways: the midpoint is in the middle of a segment, a line segment. And if it is to be in the middle, that means that the two segments it creates must be congruent to each other, meaning that their lengths are equal.